And for those of you, for those of you that haven't signed up for the little drawing that we have, we make sure that you sign your name, please be part of the drawing that we have.
Holy cow, all from Michigan?
Sure, man. Anywhere you want to go.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me okay? First of all, we want to welcome everybody here. As the months go by, we see more and more people at the meeting. So I do want to say welcome. It is so nice to see everybody here. We know that the Omicron or whatever that is going around is making a lot of people sick, but it's very good to see all of you. As beekeepers, we stay very busy, just like our bees. So we hope that this coming year, we're going to continue to present a lot of really good information for you. So just a couple housekeeping things that we want to go through. So first of all, we at the back table, we have Melissa, Henry, and Jillian that are taking orders for nukes and queens. We will be getting those in close to Easter time. But if you are thinking about getting a nuke or a queen, you need to place your order now. We only order about 300. And if you wait too long, we will not have any available for you. So don't delay on getting that. I think the last report from Gary was that we had 78 nukes ordered, but just make sure you place your order now because the price, when you compare it to what you can order from commercial beekeepers, their price is between $250 and $300. And for those of you that are interested in purchasing a nuke, you do have to be a member. The membership cost is not very much, but you do have to be a member to be able to purchase a nuke or a queen. So that's a really good benefit that we offer to our members. So make sure that you place your order before the deadline. Jimmy, what is the deadline? What's the deadline? 28th of February. Okay. Okay, so the deadline is the 28th of February, so don't delay. Okay, so we've, as of right now, we have 113 orders. So you have this time and next time. We do accept mail-in orders, but since you're here, if you're thinking about, it's a good opportunity to do that. The queens we get from Weaver and Navasota. So we've had a lot of good luck with those queens. They seem to be very mild and they're also mite resistant. So this year, since we are starting to meet in person, a lot of things had gotten suspended last year. We do have a honey queen program. We are looking for applicants for that. What the honey queen does is that the young lady will go around to different events. We get a lot of requests from organizations or fairs to have somebody represent our club. And it's a really great opportunity for a young lady to go out. They develop really great social skills in speaking to people. They learn a lot about beekeeping. And so if you do know of somebody that might be interested in that, They do not have to be a beekeeper, but they have to be interested to talk about bees. So if you know of anybody, please either reach out to us. We have, you can also go through our website and contact us through the website. We also, we have our scholarship program at the Georgetown Gardens. Last year, because of COVID, we did not have the scholarship program. It was actually okay because they redid the Georgetown Gardens. And so they have increased the space that we have at the Georgetown Gardens. It's a larger area. And so now that we have that space, once we get our hives in there, we anticipate having a couple workshops. This is a great opportunity for new members to go out and do observation of how a hive is inspected, to do a little bit of finding the queen, things like that. So we anticipate that we will be offering scholarship or offering workshops. One of the things that we've done in the past is done the varroa mite treatment. So we've started talking about that again. So just please watch out in our newsletter. The other thing because it's a new year, it's a new time to renew your membership. If you're a new member, please make sure you sign up. You don't have to be a member to come to the meetings, but we would love for everybody to be a member. So tonight, so for our meeting format, what we've kind of experimented a little bit. We've done 2 speakers from back to back, and sometimes it gets a little bit late. For those that go to bed at 9, it goes right to that bedtime. So what that's my bedtime. So what we've done is we've tried to break it up into 101 and 201. If you're a new beekeeper, the 101 is a lot of the things that you need to know as a beekeeper. But even though it's 101, I still learn a lot. Phil is he's a great, he has a wealth of information. So he'll be talking about the basics of beekeeping. And then the 201 will be done by Randy Oakley. Randy, many of you are familiar with. Some of you are big fans of him. And so wherever he goes, he has that fan following. And probably some of you came tonight for him. Randy is going to be talking about a more advanced method for beekeeping. So he will, what we're going to do is the 101, or Phil will be talking in this room. The 201 will be in a different room. Now, the one thing that we are a little worried about is that we only have space for 27 people in that room. If we do not have enough space for people in that room, what Randy has said that he'll do is he'll come back next month and do it again. So if you missed it, don't worry. He will be back next month. But because Randy is always a wealth of knowledge, and if you miss it and you want to pay attention to what he's saying, and you can't get into that room, then he will be back next month. So the additional thing I do want to discuss is Randy has brought some items for sale. So back in the back, after the meeting, you are more than welcome to purchase any items that he may have with him. I think, Randy, do you also take orders?
You go to my website. This is part back here.
Okay.
So would be some website as well.
Okay. And for those of you not aware, Randy does, he runs our scholarship program. So Randy drives in from the Temple area, from Waco. From Waco?
Yep.
Well, okay, I didn't. Randy drives in every 2 weeks to work with the scholarship kids. He, last year, we expanded not last year, we had expanded the program to an 18-month program to try to get the kids to go from, I'll let him explain it a little bit more. Do you mind coming up? Just
sure.
He had done a little bit of change to our scholarship program. Do you mind just explaining that real quick?
So we're all about trying to keep the beehives alive, and with our youth scholarship program, we just noticed we weren't getting the outcomes we wanted, and so we've been trying to tweak some things around. I think one thing we've changed is that the past 2 years we've had all the participants come to one place, which was the Georgetown Heritage Garden and work together every 2 weeks, and it builds camaraderie. And then when they get all done with the program, they're able to take their beehives home and do what they learned throughout the whole year. So it's a good program if you know anybody who's interested. Ages are 12 to 18, I believe. And the application needs to be in by when? February 15th. And we make selections in March. So go to the website or ask us, if you have any questions about that.
All right, thank you very much. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Phil will be doing the 101 in here, and then those of you interested in hearing what Randy has to say, we'll follow Randy into it'll be one of the side rooms.
Oh, it's all good.
Okay. Can you all hear me? All right. By a raise of hands, how many of you are brand new beekeepers? By brand new, I mean 1 year or less. Okay, we have several in here. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then. All right. So honeybees are eusocial. So what does that mean? Well, they have a reproductive division of work. By that I mean, well, the queen lays eggs and the rest of the hive does not. Now, there is one caveat to that. Occasionally you will get what is called a worker bee layer. And so if you don't have a queen, the worker bee may start laying, but because when she lays, that egg is not fertilized, all those eggs become drones. And so the hive is doomed at that point. And if you have one of those kind of hives, it's really difficult to get a queen established in them. And that's another topic. And then you have overlapping generations. So several generations of bees in the hive at any one time. And you have what's called cooperative care. And so the care of the young is divided into several roles, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit and what that means. So we're going to look a little bit at the morphology of the honeybee. So you see the eye there at the top. It's a compound eye, and they see in a mosaic, and they see in a yellow to the ultraviolet color range, and they detect motion very well. Now at the top, you see that ocelli, it's called, and that in itself is an eye. There's actually 3 of those, and that's to enable them to see in the dark, because in that hive, it's dark. So how do they communicate? They can't really see each other. Well, they communicate with that antenna, and that's one way. They communicate with odor, what are called pheromones, and that's another way. All right, so touch and motion and scent. So that's their primary way of communicating. Now, down at the bottom, you'll see that in the hind leg, what's called the pollen press, that's where they gather their pollen. Now, these bees are covered completely with hair. They have hair on their eyes, they have hair in their tongue. So, you think of your cat and the fur ball. I don't know that bees get fur balls, but that's a lot of hair where you've got hair just everywhere. But you get a little static electricity that's built up, and then you've got the sticky pollen. They get into the flower, they gather it, and then they use their legs to maneuver that back there to the hind legs where that pollen press gathers it. And when you look at your bees, they come in, they're loaded with pollen. All right, so now we see the 3 different types of bees that are going to be in your hive. You've got the queen bee, Her Majesty, and you notice that she has a longer abdomen, And then you see the worker bee next door there, right in the center. Now that worker bee has a pointed tail as well as the queen, and both of those can sting. Now the queen generally doesn't, but she doesn't have a barbed stinger like the worker. So that worker, when that worker stings you, that barb keeps that stinger in there. So when you take that stinger out, whatever you do, don't squeeze it. Because once that bee moves away, that venom sac gets pulled out. And if you squeeze it, you're just going to squeeze that venom under the skin even further. So you want to scrape it off. So use pocket knife, credit card, fingernail. That's how you do that. Now the drone, you notice it's got that fat bottom. And it's got those big eyes. Now there's a reason for those big eyes. Because a lot of teenage boys, they're looking for girls. And the girl they're looking for is Her Majesty, the Queen. And they gather. They have a gathering spot, might be out around the tree someplace, who knows where. I call it the Bee Biker Bar. And so they go to the Bee Biker Bar, and they wait around for the queen. They got big eyes, so they spot her coming, and off they go. Now they can only mate once, and they die. The queen is going to mate with, somewhere around 14, 15 of those dudes. Now that's going to be all of the sperm that she needs for her entire lifetime. She's going to go back to that hive, and she's not going to leave that hive after that. Unless you get in the hive and you knock her off on the ground, something like that. She will not intentionally leave that hive. And there are a couple of exceptions to that, but for the most part, she won't leave that hive. All right. So the queen, well, she's the heart and soul, Her Majesty. Her primary purpose is to lay eggs and to produce chemical scents, pheromones. And there's a host of those suckers in the hive. So the queen releases pheromones, the larvae release pheromones, the bees that guard the hive, they release pheromones. There's several different pheromones. And now that alarm pheromone, if you've ever smelled it, if you ever had a lot of bee stings, you can actually smell that alarm pheromone. It smells like bananas. So if you're going out to work on your bees, you probably don't want to take a banana with you, because they might smell that and get all upset. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, so she'll leave the queen, leave the hive as a virgin, and she'll mate with the drones. And like I said, she'll stay in the hive. Now, most beekeepers will requeen their hive once a year, sometimes every other year. It used to be, in the good old days, that you might get 4 or 5 years out of a queen. For the most part now, you're probably doing pretty well if you get 2 years out of it. So our bees are dying sooner. And that's one of the things that's happening with our honeybee decline. The hives, the community, the eusocial organism is being weakened. The bees are being weakened. And as a group, when that hive weakens, then the hive can collapse. All right, so this gives you a look at what the queen cells look like. So in the upper left corner, over there in the upper left, where that fraction of an arrow is, that is what's called a queen cup. All right, you might see a few of these in your hive. That's nothing to be worried about. If you look over on the right here on the bottom right, or no, the one on top right, that's the queen cell. Those are what we call swarm cells. And so the queen is being raised in there. When they fill that queen cup, and as they fill that, they will add more royal jelly. So the more royal jelly they add will make the difference between what is a queen and a worker. So if they add considerably more royal jelly, and I don't know what the proportion is, maybe some of the scientists do, you will generate a queen. So that queen cup is in the upper left, and then you have what are called emergency cells. An emergency cell is the one down here on the lower right. So it looks kind of like a peanut, but you notice it's not as big as the cell up there directly above it. Now, when you get emergency cell is when the hive has lost the queen, or maybe they recognize the queen is doomed. But that's a serious situation for the hive. They need a queen soon, and the queen, the larva in there, the pupa, instead of being in that cell right above and just kind of hanging in there as a straight pupa, it's kind of in there this way. As you can see, it's like half of a queen cell. Oh, there's more to it than the rest is kind of inside the cup. And then over on the lower left, that's what's called a supersedure cell. And what that means is there's a problem. The hive, for whatever reason, they recognize there's a problem in the hive. Maybe it's getting too crowded. Maybe the queen is getting weak and it's time to move along. Maybe there's something that's bothering the hive quite a bit, skunks or whatever, mice getting in. They say, well, let's leave. And so they'll just leave completely, gone. They don't split the hive like you do with the right there in the upper one, where you get a hive that splits in half. They swarm. They have a new queen that stays with the old location, and the old queen goes to the new location. So the queen there, you look in the center, you'll see her. She's the big bottom lady right there in the center. And that's how you spot them. That's how you spot that queen. Well, if you've got 30,000 bees in that hive, it's a little hard to figure out sometimes. So that's one of the things you'll learn from experience. And I still struggle finding the queen. So moving along, one of the things that we do is we mark our queens. Now, the nukes that you get from us will not be marked. And you can get marked queens from suppliers, and those generally cost a little more for that service. And because we're trying to provide a bargain, purchasing in quantity, and we go pick them up, we don't charge you anything for the transportation, we don't mark the queens. So if you want to mark the queen, you'll have to find her yourself. But that's a marked queen right there in the center. You see the red dot on her. So it makes it a little bit easier to locate her. So if you look at this, you'll see two queen cells there on the bottom. And to the right, you'll see what are called drone cells. And then above the drone cells, you will see your regular old larvae cells that are filled with brood. So the drone cells, as you can see, are bigger. The cells themselves are larger. So if you look, for example, right here, you have a standard worker cell, and down here you have a drone cell, and here you have a capped drone cell. Typically, in a hive, you will have maybe 300 or 400 drones, and you might have in a good hive 30,000 bees. All right, so there is a division of labor. We talked about that being the eusocial organism, and so when that worker bee hatches out, she immediately goes to work. Now, when she comes out, she'll start cleaning up around that cell, and she cleans the cell, she warms the brood, she does that for 1 to 3 days, and then she becomes an undertaker. In other words, she's going to start removing dead larvae, dead pupa, dead bees, and that's going to be her job from days 3 to approximately day 16. She may also, as at days 4 to 12, be feeding larvae. Now, how much time do they spend feeding larvae? Well, they may spend as much as approximately 10 hours in their lifetime doing nothing but feeding larvae and checking on. They'll tend to royalty days 7 through 12. And so by attending to royalty, that means primarily the queen. They also have to feed the drones because the drones won't feed themselves either. They just sit around and drink beer all the time. Then they transport food stores within the hive, days 12 to 18. They do a lot of fanning. So the queen has lots of fans. They work as architects and master builders. They guard the beehive. And then they ultimately become foragers. At that point, they go out in the fields, they gather water, nectar, pollen. Now, temperature in the hive, typically that temperature is going to be somewhere around 91 to 93 degrees. And they'll maintain that. In the winter, they'll form clusters and they will shiver to generate heat. The queen stays in the center and the worker bees will move in and out. Depending if they're on the outside, they get cold, they move in, and the inside folks move out. They'll continue to do that. In the summer, they will fan and they also use the water they bring in and that evaporation to cool the hive. Then we move down a little bit farther and we see 85 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be the temperature for a broodless winter cluster. Down at 68, the queen does not fly, so she's not going to go out and do any mating. 61 degrees, the drones cannot fly, so they're not going to go to the drone microbar. At 50 degrees, the brood rearing stops completely. The workers can't fly. At 42, the bees cannot move, their muscles cannot get enough heat. At 40, the bees begin to die. So the drone develops from an unfertilized egg, and that comes from the queen only. And he has a single purpose, and that's to mate with the queen, and then he dies. And because he serves no useful function in the hive other than mating, which might sound like a pretty good deal, but you get kicked out in the fall. Because why do you, if you're going to try to make it through the winter with what you have stored, you don't want something in your hive that serves no useful purpose in your social program. So they get drug out. And I've watched this happen, and sometimes they'll try to get it back in, but it doesn't work out well. So here we have some pictures of a couple drones there over on the right. Let's move on here. So the average adult life, well, a queen is 2 to 5 years, but I have never gotten 5 years out of a queen, and I don't think anybody in here probably will either. Workers, they'll live anywhere from 15 to 38 days in the summer. They just literally work themselves to death. Their wings get shredded. They don't make it back to the hive at some point. A worker in the winter will live approximately 4 to 6 months. And then the drone will live about 4 to 8 weeks. Now the drone, because of the fact that, I'll go into that a little bit, don't get ahead of myself. So honeybees all come from eggs. The eggs develop into larvae, and the larva undergoes a process called metamorphosis, and eventually they will become the caste, the eusocial grouping that we talked about, and the development time does vary a little bit. But when I say by caste, I mean, is it a worker? Is it a drone? Is it a queen? And so here we see the development time frame. And so a queen will emerge at about 16 days, a worker at 21 days, and a drone at 24. And the varroa mites have a real fondness for the drone cells because that gives them more time to get in there and do their nasty job, and they become a vector for viruses. And that's another reason that we have weaker colonies is because of the prolific nature of the varroa mite. All right, so this picture, you can't really see the cell very well, but I'll show you another one here in just a moment. You would, if you were holding this frame up to a light with the sun to your back, you would see little grain-like specks in the bottom of the cell. And there it is in black and white, enables you to see a little better. So you do have to take that frame and hold it up, get that sun to your back, and you'll be able to spot them. You'll be able to spot them pretty well. Get your reading glasses on, you're going to need them to see that. All right, so now let's take a look at some capped brood. So you'll see that in those cells that there's a liquid in there. That larvae, that egg, is going to grow over a period of time, and it is literally floating in a combination of royal jelly, worker jelly, and bee bread. Now, bee bread is nectar, honey, and saliva. So the worker bees add saliva and enzymes, which results in a probiotic bacteria, and the yeast then break that protein down into a digestible form. Now, the amount of royal jelly that's being given will vary according to the caste. So as you look down a little bit farther from where those arrows come together, you will see that different variations in size, and eventually it'll grow to the place where you won't see much royal jelly because, or much liquid in there, that combination of things, because that larva is eating it about as fast as they can put it in. And then it'll eventually get capped over and continues to grow and become ultimately a pupa, and will hatch out in a few days. And so if you've got a pattern like that, what you would typically see on a frame is you see that capped brood with the larva in kind of the center, if you imagine a rectangle, and you'll see the center portion is going to be the brood, and then around that you will see the pollen, which will be various colors. That's kind of a pollen wall almost, and then you will see honey around that. And what you want to see is a nice cluster of capped brood or cells with eggs in them. If it's a shotgun pattern, a little here, a little there, a little there, then there may be something wrong with your queen, and it might be time to consider requeening. So the larva cell looks like small worms. We talked about that. They consist of a head and a 13-ring segment. And we talked about them filling the cell pretty quickly and the color. So we'll just move along. All right, this gives you a little more of a picture there. It's a little better picture than what we got on the previous screen. So you picture that larva at the top. He's curled into little balls in the cell. They produce pheromone, which signals the nurse bees, remember the various jobs. That larva floats in that bee food, and then the nurse cell visits the cell. The nurse bees visit the cell to inspect and feed, and they will visit as much as 10,000 times during larval development. 10,000. Now that visitation time, according to a study I read, varies from anywhere from a second to maybe just a few seconds. So they don't spend a lot of time, obviously. They've got a lot of work to do. So the metamorphosis, the bees cap the larva transforms into pupa, the pupa transforms to an imago. That's a new term to me. When I was looking through these slides, I didn't notice that. And then it emerges as an adult. So an imago is a fully developed and winged insect. And so you look here and you can see the various stages. Okay, see the little dot on the bottom and the lower left, and then it goes to the larva, then the pupa, and then a little farther along, that will be the imago. So another picture of the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about nutrition. Okay, well, they have to obviously get out there and do some grocery shopping. So they'll generally go about 2 miles. So they cover about 8,000 acres. But if there's not a lot of wildflowers around, they may go as many as 5. So, but typically a couple miles. So how do they navigate? Well, they use the sun. Now that's S-U-N, not S-O-N. I wouldn't trust my son to navigate. So each honeybee colony has a unique odor, a pheromone smell that's unique to that colony. And they use that for identification. And the guard bees, remember, that's one of the jobs that they work their way up to. So the guard bees, and so when you get your bees, you will notice the guard bees right outside the entrance. And they'll kind of keep an eye on it, and as you get closer, they may fly out. And typically on my bees, which are pretty gentle, they'll just come up and bounce off of me to let me know, don't bother me too much. I got my job here. Stay away. And then I'll do my job and they'll do their job. And sometimes they try to sting me and sometimes they don't. Now, if you've got an Africanized colony, then it's a totally different situation. Okay, so what is essential nutrition? Well, you got to have a varied diet. They can't live on McDonald's hamburgers alone. All right, so they have to have a mixture of food. They need a mixture of pollens, not the same old stuff. They need a mixture of nectar, and all that believe that the nectar is honey, that's your carbohydrate, and the pollen is their protein. This is one of the reasons that hives are weakening, is because we have a condition in our country called monoculture. Monoculture means that out where I live, it's all honey and it's all cotton and corn. Now there are wildflowers, don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of them along the road, there's a lot of them on my property, but it's not like it was years ago. There is not that smorgasbord for the bees as there used to be. And so that ultimately affects their health. And all these things added together begin to weaken their hive. Remember I mentioned the varroa mite. Now we're talking about nutrition and monoculture. Then we could mention insecticides, and even the systemic insecticides like the ones derived from tobacco, which are called nicotinoids. So the pollen is necessary in order to create that royal jelly I was talking about. And that has the essential amino acids. And by the way, that's one of the reasons you don't want to, when you heat your honey, you don't want to put it in the microwave because that destroys the amino acids and some of the other beneficial aspects of honey. So that's the reason we don't recommend heating your honey up when it begins to crystallize in a microwave. It's essential for brood rearing. It provides a complex mixture, which they need. And during the pollen dearth, what does that mean, dearth? Well, there's just not a lot of it around. There's not a lot of pollen around. They have this stuff stored away. And so if you look on that picture there, you will notice right up here, kind of looks a little orange, maybe sometimes it's red, sometimes it's yellow. That's your pollen. That's packed away, and they're storing that. And typically, you're going to see a line of pollen around your brood when you look at your frame. All right, anybody know what that is that bee's probably carrying there in the center? It is that. I think it's probably bluebonnet pollen, which is typically a reddish orange color. You wouldn't think so. And I was a little surprised when I found out that the bluebonnet pollen was reddish orange. All right, so the nectar, that's carbohydrate. We talked about that. You want a variety. We talked about that. It's necessary for building comb, generating warmth in the winter. It gives them that energy they need. It provides them the food and the supplement that they need as well to get them through the winter. And you may have to provide them some of what I call artificial nectar from time to time. In other words, you might have to provide them with some sugar syrup So how much do we feed? Well, during prime foraging months, your hive should have at least 15 pounds of honey. That's minimum. And that's basically 5 frames, 5 to 3 deep frames. In the winter, they should have a minimum of 30 pounds. And then there you see here the mix. So, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the fall program and how much to do. We'll also talk more about feeding as we explain more about what you need to do for your hives as you get your nukes and get ready to feed them. But that's your ratio, and that's a weight ratio or volume ratio. 1 to 1 is March through September, 2 to 1 is during the winter months. The reason that you don't put as much water in your mix, so 2 parts sugar to 1 part water in the winter, is they just have to fan that extra moisture off in the winter, and then you get condensation up there on the top of your hive. It drips down, it cools the bees, and that's not good for them. So hopefully you won't have to do too much feeding. If you've got a nice strong hive that's very productive, you won't have to do much feeding. So when you do make that syrup, as I said, you want to, some people weigh it, well, I do it by volume. So you heat the water in a pot until it boils, and once it boils, then you shut off the heat. You don't want to put the sugar into that boiling water and let it continue to boil, because you'll get a byproduct that, and I don't remember the name of it offhand, but you'll get a byproduct that is not healthy for the bees. So you shut off the heat, then you put in your sugar, stir it up, and that's going to be your supplemental feed, supplemental sugar, artificial nectar, whatever you want to call it. You don't want to give them too much because it can get moldy, so you get whatever you, generally what they can consume in 1 week. Okay, do we have any questions? Anything at all? Didn't necessarily have to be what I was talking about. Yes.
It's not really a question, this statement. You know, you had a picture there earlier where the queen bee was playing with a bunch of worker bees sitting on a frame. And they could very well be sisters. They could come from the same hive, they could come from the same egg, from the same queen. And to say that the worker bee is going to live 6 weeks, and because it's a queen, it's going to live 250 weeks, it's just plain stupid. A queen bee's never lived 5 years. It's absolutely impossible. And they very rarely live 3 years. 2 years is the average, and that's why most of the commercial guys requeen every year, because they lose so many queens during the winter in the second year. The queens never live 3 to 5 years.
That's why I put that caveat in there that you're not going to see a 5-year.
No.
But in the literature, you will see a claim for 5 years. I've never seen it. He's never seen it. Now, it is possible that maybe 100 years ago, maybe that was the case. But certainly not anymore. Yes.
In your slide, you said for December and January to feed straight sugar.
No.
What would
Well,
that
you
be?
can.
What would that
You can use regular sugar. So on the top, you will put like some cardboard, and then just pour sugar over the top of that. And then the moisture that's in the hive will soften that a little bit, and they'll go up and they'll consume that sugar and store it. If you're using liquid, then you're going to use as I mentioned, the 2 to 1 during the winter. Generally, you're not going to open your hive up when it's cold like this. Yeah, you're not, unless it's an emergency. You don't want to open your hive if the temperature is lower than 60 degrees. The lower the temperature, the faster you better be, or you're going to affect the hive. So, yeah. Now, if you, I know some beekeepers will kind of tip their hive a little bit, see if it seems lighter, and they can tell if they've been monitoring, if they maybe need to give some supplemental. Yes.
Why does checkerboarding work? Can you explain that to us?
Okay, checkerboarding is, well, I don't particularly like checkerboarding. And from what I've gathered, the best way to do that, remember what I said about the nectar wall? Or not the nectar wall, but the pollen wall. And so you've got your, in the center, you have your brood, then you've got your pollen, and then you've got your honey. So what you want to do is the outside of your, if you imagine a 10-frame box, the outside frames are going to be your honey, and then you've got your pollen frames, and then you've got your brood frame. You can juggle that around, but you want to move your pollen frame out to give them room in order to lay. If you can picture that. So if your pollens or your brood is in here, your pollen is right here, and your honey on your frame is here. If you're trying to generate a good honey flow, you want to make sure they've got room for more honey. And so you're going to then move that wall, that pollen wall out a little bit.
Away from your brood, you mean?
Away from the brood, and then you're going to put in a frame with wax, you want to keep your old frames, the ones that your bees have cleaned up. Okay, and so you're going to take that and you're going to put it in here. It's empty, and now they can build out their brood. And you're going to do the same thing up here, and up here they're going to ultimately move up. So you might have a queen excluder up here to keep them from going into the upper portion. I don't use a queen excluder, some people do, and I've never had a problem. And so the point is, you're trying to move that nectar wall out. Now, checkerboarding, I don't do it. Does anybody here have experience with checkerboarding? I can explain it better than I can.
You're doing a pretty good job. You gotta give the queen a place to lay.
Yeah.
They get bound by pollen or they get bound by honey. You gotta move it somewhere and put an empty comb in your brood nest where your queen can lay.
That's right.
That's basically what you're getting at. That's what checkerboarding is all about.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
it's also expanding your hive, right? So you're trying to, if you're gonna,
Well, bees like black frames more than they do foundation, even if the foundation is rough. Bees to lay it, bees, they like the black frame, so I always keep them light. I got 4 or 5 boxes or 20 boxes of them now stacked up for my breeder queens in the spring, because you put a black frame in the middle of the brood nest, and within 15 minutes, the queen is laying it, just like that. You get bound up by a lot of things.
They gotta have room. They gotta have room. If they don't have room, then they perceive that as a problem, and you may end up with a supersedure situation. Yeah.
I think bees get bound by honey more than they do by pollen. You get a small cluster of bees, maybe 2 or 3 times, and the whole brood nest is full of honey. There's not enough bees to consume the honey to give her a place to lay early in the spring. So you gotta move it away and put some empty combs by your brood nest, and then the brood nest will expand rapidly. So you gotta be an old beekeeper to know that, Real.
Yeah, that's why inspecting your hive is important.
We'll take more questions, but we'll do the draw.
Okay. Any other questions?
As far as pest control goes.
Well, what we're gonna do now is the drawing, and then we'll take more questions.
Okay, hold your question. We'll catch you here in a moment.
It's for,
Shannon.
if anybody has the ticket, we'll hold the tickets. And Jimmy is gonna run over. You want us to wait?
078.
Does anybody have 078?
If not, we'll take it next door. 054. Next door on that one. 062.
Sweet, okay.
There we go.
And we have the, and then before everybody leaves, we also have some beekeeping magazines back there that are free for anybody to take. So just before you leave, I'm gonna let Phil go ahead and answer more questions. Now I will say that Art, I wasn't aware of this, but Jimmy whispered in my ear. Art is an old beekeeper who has a lot of knowledge. He, you also raise queens, right? Well,
I was the bee yard.
Don't call him old.
My grandparents were
Not
bee
old.
breeders and my dad. You know, I've been running from them little critters for a long time.
but Art, you also raise queens.
Yeah, I
right?
raised
Okay.
queens to some extent.
So if we ever need a queen, you're a good person to talk to.
Yes, ma'am.
And where do you live?
Rockdale.
Okay,
It's
Just-
to the east there, about 50 miles or so.
but I thought it was good for everybody to know because a lot of us scramble for queens in the summertime and you can't find any queens in the area. So just to keep that in mind. I'm gonna go ahead and let Phil answer any other questions that you guys might have.
Okay, a throw my question back there.
Yeah, I've seen different stuff about the drone come out of it, outside gas and Apple. I was just wondering what you personally, as far as pest control goes. I know that's gonna be a big topic.
Yeah, I've never had any luck with the drone comb method. I suppose that there must be some folks that have, because I see them advertised on the drone comb advertised on the supply sites for bee merchandise. So apparently there's a market for it. I personally have never had any success with it. I tried it, like a lot of new beekeepers, you try it and, you know, so. Art, have you ever done the drone comb thing?
I got a drone comb in every colony I own, and two of them, a lot of them, but I need boy bees. I need something to make my queens.
Yeah, you gotta have the boy bees over at the biker bar.
But another added asset is that once in a while, when you find a colony that, you know, that's got some mites, you pull that drone, bring them out, you take it, freeze it, you kill most of the mites that are in the bee, colony. So
Yeah,
it's good for that.
that's the concept, is that if you have a drone frame, which they'll build out on that, it has, when you look at the imprints on drone frames, when you buy them, they're a little bigger and they're usually green. And they build out on that, you pull that out, take it out, you freeze it, and you put it back in the hive.
And that does work.
Yeah, theoretically it works. I tried it, it didn't, so. But I'd say they didn't even build up on mine. That was my problem. I tried it a couple times. They didn't even build up.
Yeah.
So what do you use?
Yeah, it's just, what do I use? Well, I use primarily oxalic acid, and I do that, you know, in the fall or winter, and that seems to work pretty well for me.
Paper.
I use the vapor, yes. And what else was it you asked? There was.
Oh, I was just asking between the
Oh,
drone,
okay, yeah.
oxalic or Apple.
Yeah, the bee club or the scholarship, I think they use Apivar. Am I right, Jimmy? Don't they use Apivar?
Apivar and Formic Pro.
And Formic Pro. Yeah, I've used Formic Pro. It was pretty messy, you know. I just had that stuff all over me, but it works too. So.
Yes, it kills the brood or no?
I didn't have any problem with it, but
Formic acid, I mean, doesn't it kill the brood?
Yes.
Yeah. That's what it does.
That kills the mites under the nest.
Yeah.
And so that way it's an ultimate treatment. So that's your last treatment of the year.
yeah, you don't want to do that too late. That's for sure. Yes, Jim.
Can you explain why dripping oxalic acid works and how effective is that compared to paper?
It's about the same effectiveness, yeah. And I can't explain why it works, but Jimmy?
There is an article in the newsletter that just came out, talks about oxalic acid,
Mhm.
talks about two different times of administration of that. So that would be a good source.
Is that the last news club newsletter? Yeah.
Sunday morning.
Okay, there you go.
You know, I use oxalic acid, I forget what the formula is, but so many milliliters of oxalic acid with glycerin and water. And I think
Oh,
it's
yeah.
around 65 or 70. And I got it up to 90, and I killed a whole bunch of my bees years ago. So
Yeah,
you
that-
want to follow directions, don't be like me.
Yeah,
You know, the good part is
that was an experiment. That
Be
was,
careful with that stuff.
they called that the blue cloth experiment, I believe. They were trying the oxalic acid on different bases and put that in the hive on this blue shop cloth and I haven't read any more about that. I gather it was not successful. Any other questions?
I have a question. Still on oxalic acid.
Yes.
I was reading somewhere where it's just wood bleach.
Yes, that's actually what it is. It's wood bleach. Now, I've been told that you shouldn't use the wood bleach. I don't know if there's really any difference in the formulation. There's only, as of a couple of years ago, I don't know if it's still the case, there was only one company that sold the oxalic acid that was specifically for bees. But the wood bleach, oxalic acid is not supposedly the same thing. That's what I've used.
Are the percentages different? If I order oxalic acid from a bee supplier, is it gonna give me a certain percentage or they come in different formulation?
I think it's the same thing, but then I'm not 100%
And
sure.
it's like and they give you a measuring spoon and it's really easy. I mean, it would take you forever to use that bag. I mean, depending on how many hives you have, I should say.
Yeah.
Because I've had that bag for
And we're running 10 eyes.
5 years.
Yeah.
And I still
The
have
amount-
same bag.
the amount
It
that you
takes such a
use is-
small amount.
Like, what about less than a quarter of a teaspoon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very small amount. So yeah, it didn't take much. When it was approved to be used in bees by the, I don't know, is it the Food and Drug Administration that does that? They approved it for this one company that made it. And so because of their cost involved in trying to get that approval, they in turn have to pass that cost along. And so theirs does cost more than if you go out and buy wood bleach. I'd say probably a good percentage of people actually use the wood bleach. But if you know another beekeeper, just get a little bit from them, get an ounce or a couple ounces, that'll last you quite a while.
And wear protective gear when you do it. It's
Oh,
very
yeah.
toxic to your lungs.
Right, yeah, you need to rest one of those masks,
The real ones, not the paper ones.
yeah. It's got a little thing on each side.
Presently.
You look like a World War I soldier. Trying to keep away from mustard gas.
Let me address this group about what's coming up. Let me address you about what's coming up. While we're waiting on these people over the next room to come in, a lot of you are newbies. I saw the hands go up. A lot of this discussion that we're carrying on right now means absolutely nothing to you. So for those who are getting bees or have bees for 1 year, what we have coming up between now and April is when we get our bees. And so what you want to consider doing is determining how many hives you want, ordering nukes if that's what you're going to use. Go ahead and look at the bee catalogs and order your equipment for those bees whenever they come in, because they come in a 5-frame wooden box, but you have to have equipment to put them in after that. So that's your first order your bees, see about getting your equipment, your protective gear, if you want to wear that. And for the most part, the bees that we're working.
If you want to wear that.
For the most part, the bees we're working can be worked with just a veil and maybe a pair of gloves. Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak a little bit about locating that brand new hive for
my rule of thumb is, I've been running bees since, only since '85. So, but my rule of thumb is you want the bees to face east or south, because that's where the sun's gonna be coming up. You want the bees warmed in the morning, help them get going. And then you want the sun to their back, to the west, in the evening to help shade when it gets too warm. In Texas, because of hive beetles, I say locate your bees in full sun. They'll cool the hive down as needed. So you're gonna face east, south, southeast, and you're gonna locate your bees on, I'd say on a high ground, and with some kind of protection to the backside, trees, shrubs, something like that on the west side, the north and west side, because of when we get cold weather, you want something to block the wind. So, and otherwise, it'd be nice to have it where it was all weather, where you could get in and get out, even when you have a lot of rain. So, and you're living in a city, you want to abide by the rules of that community about how far to locate bees from a fence line or from a neighbor, so you can be a good neighbor. Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're on 14 acres, so how far from the house, how far from the driveway, that sort of thing.
I would just pick out a nice place, preferably where you can see the bees from the house, just in case. You can always look out there and see that they're okay, that they haven't been knocked over by a cow or ravaged by a raccoon or something like that. But distance from the house where they won't bother you, and at the same time, probably, hopefully, where you could see the bees at the same time.
And Jimmy, where you can drive a truck to.
Yeah, and like I said, whether you want to, if you're going to pull honey and so forth off the hives, that can be a lot of weight there, so you'll want some kind of vehicle to do that with. But order your bees, get your equipment, your woodware, your protective gear, and then we have books that you can check out of our library that will give you some basic information in addition to what you're getting here. So that's what you're looking at coming up. These classes you're taking here in the basics of beekeeping are just what you need. It's just the basics to start out with, and you continue to come to the meetings and learn as you go.
Okay, Uncle. I teach a beekeeping class twice a month at the Ocala Library. It's free. So all of you are new, right? Brand new. Come bring your questions. We have a live hive. Bring a suit, bring your smoker. We'll teach you how to use your smoker. We'll teach you how to put your suit on. And we'll answer your questions about where to put your hive and stuff like that. My name is Elaine. I've been a member here for, I don't know. My daughter was a honey queen here, so that's how I started here.
She's a good one, too.
Yeah, she was.
You're at the Ocala Library?
I'm at the Ocala Library in Briggs. So you have to come to me. I can't come to you. I can't mentor because I'm a sideline. I have too many bees and my own to take care of. So if you want to learn how to do beekeeping other than here, it'll be the 2nd and the 4th Saturday of the month, starting next month.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock, from 11 to 1, kind of, sort of.
Why don't you give your phone number?
Yeah, my phone number is 254. Everybody write this down, 254-368-9945.
One more time.
I just got a new phone number. I have an ex-husband now, so you know I have a new phone number. 254-368-9945. So if you have any questions in the meantime, you can call me. But it's the 2nd and the 4th Friday from 11 to 1 at the Ocala Library on Saturdays. Saturday. On Saturdays. Okay?
From 11 till.
On Saturday at the library for free. Bring your smoker. We'll teach you how to light a smoker. We'll teach you how to put your suit on. And we'll teach you whatever you need to learn, okay? Any other questions?
Your name?
Elaine. Okay?
Elaine, is there a cost to the classes?
Free.
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 Great price.
Bring donuts, bring coffee. Big donations for the library.
Queens.
You have to talk to Art about Queens.
Next month's session will be on equipment and supplies and a few other things thrown in, but that'll be primarily your equipment and supplies. And I'll bring a few show and tell items as well. Have we done it?
For those of you that did not get to see Randy's presentation, he will be back next month. And we just want to thank everybody for coming. It is great to see everybody's face in person. So if you don't have your supplies yet for your yard, go ahead and get that started. Everybody has their preferred suppliers. If now's a good time, some of the suppliers offer free shipping if you purchase over $100. They're pretty quick, but do not wait till a day before you are ordering your nukes. It'll be way too late. So thank you guys for coming, and have a great evening. We'll see you guys next month.
All right. Great.